lot of people, they think they want to know, and then when they come into really seeing the deepest parts of themselves that they've been avoiding looking at, that can be terrifying.
And is the microdose as much of a risk to your actual life as a full dose might be?
So, as far as working with Iboga, you definitely need to do some background work. Of course, if it's possible, I recommend like knowing somebody that somebody you know knows.
How would you say then the long-term impact of Ibogaine has played out in your own life?
Iboga has completely transformed everything in my life. All the trajectories and directions that I thought that I was going in my life just fully shifted onto, okay, I need to work with this medicine. I'm ready to step up my game as a healer and as a medicine man myself. One thing that really bothers me in this space is a lot of people that they've done a couple ceremonies and then they think that they're a shaman or a facilitator. I didn't even start serving ayahuasca until well over 1,000 ceremonies.
The Webdelics podcast is back, and we have with us today Nahum Vizakis. Nahum, welcome to the show. I'm so stoked about having you.
Thank you so much, Scott. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, and it's super stoked just to be a guest on Webdelics. Let's get it.
It is a privilege to have you, especially considering the topics we're going to focus on today. We're going to talk about your journey with Ibogaine, which is really exciting for me because that is a substance that we have not focused on a lot in this show, but it is of extreme importance and can have some pretty major impacts on people's lives, as you're going to go into in a lot more detail with us. And then we're also going to be talking about the dark side of ketamine. You know, Nahum, one of the things I love about being part of Webdelics is we don't just grab our pom-poms and start cheerleading about everything without having a real discussion. And that real discussion includes sometimes things that can be uncomfortable for folks to hear and know about, but they need to. So your candor about that in advance is appreciated. But let's start with Ibogaine. For those who are not familiar with that word, what is it?
Ibogaine is a root bark that comes from a bush out of Gabon, Africa. The Bouidi tribe have rights to it, and they have been the sort of holders of that medicine for a very, very long time. In fact, the way that it was discovered was there is a gentleman out there that had just lost his wife, and he was on the verge of wanting to take his own life, and he was traveling just out in the wilderness, and after a couple of days he hadn't had anything to eat or drink, and so he was starving, and he grabbed this random brush and he just started eating it. When he ate it, he started, of course, tripping his brains out, but he saw his wife, and when he met his wife, she told him that the whole reason why she died and why he needs to go on, and that this gift was here to purify his soul so that he could come back and share it with others, which I find is a very fascinating story.
Almost mythical in its feel. Wow. How did Ibogaine come into your life? Because let's face it, it's not the most famous of the psychedelics out there, right? It's not like ayahuasca or magic mushrooms, LSD, anything like that. 99% of people have never even heard of it.
You're absolutely right. Ibogaine is in a class all in and of itself. Even in the plant medicine community, it's not very well known. It is the single best medicine out there for addiction, but on a deeper level than that, addiction isn't just isolated to drugs and alcohol, right? We can be addicted to a belief system, certain thoughts, ways of being, if you will. So Ibogaine, I found it in 2021, early 2021. I had already done well over 1,000 ayahuasca ceremonies, so I was already very much in the medicine space, but I was going through a really hard time through a custody battle, and a lot of change and things were happening in my life. And I had set the intention, for probably about a year, looking for the right person. I had connected with a few people and just didn't really feel right. So one day I was scrolling on Instagram actually, and I saw this one account that said "Combo Healing Me," and the post said, "If you're interested in microdosing Iboga, message me." Like, oh, okay. So I checked this guy's page, and ironically, he was a white dude from Hollywood, and I was like, "Whoa, who is this guy?" His name is Bryce Draper, and I messaged him. He responded right away, and just the energy, the feel of it was like I was reconnecting with an old friend, right? So literally, like I asked him, and it was a little expensive, so I was like, well, how about I, give you half, and then you send it to me, and I'll pay you the other half, like, and then he called me. I gave my number, and he called me, and we literally just started, chopping it up, and come to find out, we had a lot in common. So he sent it out to me. I got it like 3 days later, and I measured it out, and I started microdosing it, and didn't really feel a whole lot at first, but I started to the best way I can describe it is I kind of started after about 3 or 4 days feeling like my body was vibrating. I could feel the vibration of my body. It was subtle, right? But then I realized, like, I would drink coffee with it, and the coffee hit me like 10 times harder. Like, whoa, okay, what's this doing to my body? I want to know more. And we jumped on a call again, and he was like, "Hey, well, listen, I'm going to be." At the time, I was living in Las Vegas, and he was like, "Well, I have an Iboga ceremony that I'm getting ready to facilitate in Las Vegas. I think it was next month. It was like March of 2021." I was like, "Hey, I'm in. Let's go. Let's get it. I'm fully down." It felt right finally, but at the same time, I was terrified. Like, even after doing ayahuasca, like, I heard like you could actually die, on this medicine. And so I really wanted to do my due diligence, but there was not a whole lot of information out there.
Yeah.
So I spoke to Bryce quite a bit at length, and he had spent a year and a half in Africa with the Bleedy tribe, and connected to them and learned the processes. So the first ceremony that I did was in Las Vegas. There was 21 of us there. It was an electric energy. In fact, when I was getting ready to go into that ceremony, I was actually planning for my death, just in case, whenever you're doing this kind of work, that, your ego is about to go through a dissolution process. But knowing that the journey was like up to 26 hours long, I was like, that's way, way longer than anything else that I had ever done before. So we got there. He was very on point. He was very, very, I could tell he was a very strong healer and leader. And we did the root bark. So there are 4 different ways that you can employ Iboga. You have Ibogaine, which is typically done in a clinical setting where they put an IV in you and they just give the alkaloid Ibogaine. That, for me personally, is the least beneficial method of utilization for that medicine. Iboga, the root bark, it has many, many alkaloids. I don't know exactly how many, but there's, similar to ayahuasca, where the different combinations provide different MAOI inhibitors, and different alkaloids that can help, with the process. Same with Bufo as well, right? When you use it from the secretion of the toad, there's about a dozen alkaloids in there that actually feed into the spiritual experience as opposed to just the psychedelic process, right? So Iboga, and you can take much higher amounts of the Iboga root bark, and it's less like for the Ibogaine and for PTA and TA, which I'll get to in a minute. Those you have to be much more calibrated in the dosage. It's a certain milligrams per kilogram of body weight, right? So the Iboga, I ended up doing. I was the biggest guy in the ceremony, so he gave me, I think it was about 15 to 20 grams at first, and then every 30 minutes we were going around and we were just taking more and more and more until my body started rejecting it, and I just started purging. And the purges on Iboga are way, way more intense than any other purge on any other medicine that I've ever done, which is saying a lot, because you can purge pretty hard on ayahuasca and combo. But anyways, I went into it, and it was very dark, honestly, for me. the initial experience, from what I remember, and now mind you, I did Iboga root bark for the first session. I did 4 flood doses in 4 months.
What's a flood dose?
The flood dose is when you go all the way into the process. So typically, the flood dose is when you go on the 16 to 24-hour journey, right? It's opposite of the microdose, which is just taking about 0.8 grams a day for an extended period of time, right? So the microdose, you can still function, throughout the day. With the flood dose, you are completely paralyzed and incapacitated, and it's a complete death and rebirth, like complete. So I took about 70 or 80 grams from my first flood dose. And when I went into it, I initially, first I started hearing like spirits, almost like I went into a spiritual subway. And there was just little voices whispering everywhere. And then I started hearing this weird buzzing sound. Like, I think to like, about clowns, how they use that little thing they turn and it's like right? And it was sitting right here in the back of my neck, but it was weird because it felt so real that I kept opening my eyes, looking around, seeing if there was something around me that was making that sound. And the very different thing about Iboga is that when you close your eyes, you go completely into the visuals and completely into the experience. But if you open your eyes, you come out of it. Now, your body is still like, you can't really move, right? But you can come in and out of it depending on if you open or close your eyes. Whereas other medicines, you're still in the journey, in the process, but you really feel like you're in there. Like when you close your eyes, and it's almost like when you meditatively tune into it, it takes you into another dimension, like where it's hard to decipher what's real and what's journey.
You have only just begun to talk to us about that flood dose experience. I want to hear the whole thing, and I know the audience wants to hear the whole thing too. But you've also said some things that I think it might be helpful if we took a step back and get some clarification on, or maybe went into a little bit more detail about.
Sure.
Let's start with the big thing that Nahum, I just cannot let it go. Right? You said that people can die during Ibogaine ceremonies. So let's not just have that be, I'll just casually mention on the side, right? Like some pharmaceutical commercial where they list all of the possible is death, mutilation, paralysis, and torture, right? So talk to us a little bit more about that. What is that risk about? How can you avert it? Or is it just, hey, it may not be your lucky day that day, or your genetics might not be lucky?
Yeah, no, it's definitely like determinable, if that's a word. So Iboga dehydrates you quite a bit, right? Not only that, but you have to get an EKG before you do it, because it can drop your blood pressure quite a bit. There's literally a sort of sense of paralysis that comes when you go into this space where you can't move, you can't function. Your equilibrium is like locked into this nucleus place where if you try to move your head, you'll get so dizzy, you'll get nauseous. So you really have to be very well hydrated, which the way I did it, we always did an IV before and an IV after the blood dose. Now, people that have deep addictions and people that have struggled with addictions of really heavy drugs typically go to do this thing. So you also have to get your liver checked, which is interesting to me because a lot of people that do a lot of drugs typically, have had, their liver beat up quite a bit. But Iboga, it requires a lot of work in the liver to metabolize, right? So a lot of times what we would do, because I used to serve Iboga at the healing center I had in Mexico, we would do, I would do a full blood panel, right, and an EKG, but I would make sure that the liver was strong enough. And if it wasn't, then we do a pre-detox, usually with combo and or, some, glutathione IVs or other, customized processes in order to ensure that the liver is strong enough and healthy enough to be able to handle it. But the big thing is the blood pressure. If your blood pressure drops too much and you have some kind of arrhythmia in your heart, then that can be a contraindication. Right? So very, very important. Like, cannot stress it. I think one time I lost almost 15 pounds just from the dehydration.
Wow.
right? But I always make sure that I stay well hydrated, and we always did an IV before and an IV after the process.
Is it totally terrifying when you're paralyzed? Even think, look, when I was in the hospital a couple years ago, the very serious illness, I had to be in a MRI for like an hour and a half. And right, anyone who knows that knows, right, you really can't move. And if I tried to move at all, I mean, they had me sedated, they had me playing music that was kind of distracting, right? But still, it was hell on earth, terrifying. And by the time I was out of that, I felt like I was crawling out of some sort of ordeal that like the Inquisition had put me through. Right? Is the paralysis or this inability to move in Ibogaine like that?
No, it's more. Look, when you're getting ready to do a medicine like this, it's all about facing your own truth, right? So a lot of people, they think they want to know, and then when they come into really seeing the deepest parts of themselves that they've been avoiding looking at, that can be terrifying. But the expression, the only thing to fear is fear itself, comes to mind, because it's an energy and a consciousness that makes you look at yourself no matter what. And a lot of times it doesn't make sense initially, right? But I will also say too, it heals ancestral karma and trauma. It will change your life and in every possible way that you can think of, right? Which, when you're mentally and emotionally ready to go to that place where you want to change and you want to shift your life and you want to understand and get beyond this loop that you've been stuck in, there is no better medicine in the world than Iboga.
You mentioned, and we're going to get to some of that stuff you just talked about in a second, I'm sure, once we get back to your main story. But there's one other thing I wanted to ask you: the microdose.
Uh-huh.
You said that you felt as though your entire body, you didn't use these exact words, but this is how I took it, was in this vibrational state.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? And okay, so your body was in a vibrational state, but like, so what? What was the impact of that in your life?
To me, it was kind of like how people may look at the limitless pill. The way that I interpret it is, it turns up the volume on your intuition. Mm-hmm. And also it kind of brings you into a very clear, clean, perpetual meditative state. So, have you ever been in a deep meditation where you can just feel your body vibrating?
I have to say, I have.
Okay. So, which is a great hack too, because a lot of people, myself included, have had very difficult times learning how to meditate. Mm-hmm. So when you can shift your consciousness, like lightning fast, into that place, once you've experienced that, then you have a better understanding experiential of how to get back there. Right? So it's not like a stimulant kind of energy. It's a very clear, aligned, connected, energetic flow. So intuition becomes off the charts. Creative insight and energy, right? Answers to, like, if you tune in and you're asking yourself a question, if you're trying to make a big decision in life, you will get a fairly clear answer to whatever it is that you're asking yourself.
And is the microdose as much of a risk to your actual life as a full dose might be?
No, not at all. No. And actually, I've been able to get people off of SSRIs, and I've been able to help people to balance or clear out autoimmune issues just with microdoses alone.
So, wow. Okay. Well, so we'll have to get back to that a little bit later, but let's get back to your 26-hour. And are you not eating that whole time, or are you right? Is this like this sort of involuntary fast that you're going through your 26 hours of paralysis, or what? Just tell the story. I have to know.
So there are phases to it, right? So and also the way that I did it, we would fast for at least 6 hours before we would go into the journey. Mm-hmm. So you're actually fasting for almost about 36 hours, right? But going through that process, like for me personally, I wasn't really super hungry even after, because it cleaned you out so well.
Let's then get back to your journey. You began the ceremony. What happened?
So I went in. The first phase lasts about 3 to 5 hours, right? And that's where you're going in, and sort of it feels like you're just descending into the darkness of your consciousness. And you close your eyes, you just start to get really tired, and it's almost like, for me, it was like I started speeding through like a wormhole of energy. It literally felt like a wormhole. And as these spirits started talking around me, they looked like Gumby with big white eyes, right? And of course, we were listening to the Bouidi music, which, by the way, is like spiritual nails on a chalkboard. It's not pleasant, in my opinion. However, it connects to the medicine in a way that like irritates your consciousness to break into the parts that are you haven't been able to get to up until that point. It like irritates you open, if you will. Mm-hmm. So these four Gumby looking guys were like kind of dancing, doing this little shimmy, right, staring at me. And then this curtain, there was like 3 stairs and a curtain in front of them. There are 2 on the side, right? And this curtain opens, and behind the curtain, it was, the best way I can describe it, it was hell. There was like mangled bodies being ripped up, and there was people screaming and dying, and fire and brimstone and all that kind of stuff. And I was freaked out. I was like, why am I seeing this? What is going on? And mind you, I've done a lot of ayahuasca up to this point, right? So I've never had an experience quite like this. And then telepathically, these little Gumby people were telling me to walk into it. And I didn't really have much of a choice. It kind of felt like it was just pushing me in there. So I went and walked into this curtain area, this hell. And as soon as I went in, it blasted open and disintegrated into this hurricane of like lightning-based, colorful lightning-based lightning bolts that just brought me into another level or another layer of this wormhole that I was going into. And then that went on for, I don't know how, I mean, your sense of time is all completely, out of whack with the process. So the next thing I remember was another staircase of sacred geometry opened up, and it opened up in front of me. I felt like it was going to my 8th, 9th, and 10th chakra. Okay. And this staircase of sacred geometry opened up into like a portal, something you would see in like an Avengers movie, right?
Wow.
And this portal opened up, and there was a face, a man. It looked kind of like an ape or like an orangutan or something, but he had a dark hood. He was very angry. He was looking at me like he was pissed. And he looked back at me, and then suddenly some sacred geometry started making shapes, and it closed it off, and it's like, boom, he went away. Like he was no longer welcome there. And at that point is when I started puking my brains out. And I don't know how long I puked or purged for, but after that, I was just toast. I was exhausted. And then sometime after that was when I had an eye cover on, and I raised it up, and I looked over, and it was light out. So by that time, it had been at least 16 hours, because we started at about 6, 7 p.m. And that's really a bulk of what I remember from that point. Now, at that point, the first phase is going into it, and then, it fully coming online. Then there's a second phase that lasts, I'd say, probably from hour 5 to about hour 15 to 17, right? And then after that, you have a period of time of, I'd say, maybe 3 to 6 hours of, now the visuals start to go away. Now you can move a little bit, but it's like you just did a whole lot of work, and you feel like, you just, worked for 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And then you slowly start coming out of it. And this is a more introspective, like, what did I just experience? Yeah. And but the stillness is impossible. Nothing else comes close to the level of stillness and lightness that I felt in my consciousness. It was very foreign to me, and my body still wasn't fully functioning. It took, I'd say probably, until about 10, 11 a.m. that next day, to really fully be able to like get up on my own and go pee, by myself.
I am so grateful that you vividly described what you saw and experienced. It really helps concretize what it is like to engage with these sacred plants. And those that are not familiar with psychedelics of any type, sometimes really need that concretization to be able to understand and appreciate what happened. To the point, then, your experience was over, many hours had passed, and you left changed, or did the change come afterwards? Was there an integration portion? Talk to us about how this moved from being the wildest, scariest, to my ears at least, experience of your life into something that has made you an advocate for these substances.
Well, Scott, I'd say it probably took about 48 to 72 hours, 2 to 3 days post ceremony until I fully felt like I was back. In fact, for 2 nights afterwards, whenever it got dark out, I would look around and I would see these zingers going on. But what was really cool about it is that I would move my eyes side to side and these zingers would like give me energy. It was pretty wild. And that's also something that I've never experienced on any other medicine before.
That is wild. Okay, so you had 48 hours or so to just sort of come back to your quote unquote normal brain state. Then how did it play out with you from there?
So after that, me and Bryce, we just started like communicating every day, and he had already had this healing center down in Rosarito, Mexico, and we talked about doing work together. He was excited to teach me what he knew, and he had a lot of things lined up. I'd say that I didn't really surround myself with many people for 2 days afterwards. I just spent time alone, and I was enjoying. I think I went for a hike, and I did a lot of journaling, right? And it was at that point, everything in my life started to change. Meaning that I was dating a woman at the time, and we had a very passionate relationship at first, but there was an underlying deep dysfunction underneath all that. And suddenly, just me being me was triggering the hell out of her, and I just started feeling like and also like the work I was doing, all the trajectories and directions that I thought that I was going in my life just fully shifted onto, okay, I need to work with this medicine. I'm ready to step up my game as a healer and as a medicine man myself. So me and Bryce actually started making plans. He wanted me to come down to Mexico to see him, and we just started putting things together, doing more and more healing work. Because at that time, I was serving combo. I was doing. I created a vibroacoustic bodywork experience. I call it cocoon experience with ketamine, and I had also been doing a lot of work with DMT, sassafras, and of course ayahuasca. So I stopped doing ayahuasca. I actually stopped everything else, temporarily, because I felt like, Iboga was this is the period of my life where Iboga was getting ready to teach me quite a bit. And then we almost immediately scheduled the next one down in Mexico. But, I don't really remember much from the second and third one, but the fourth one was really where it kind of capped everything off, and everything at that point completely transformed my life.
How so? Tell us about it.
Well, the fourth one, I got to this point where I was like, I'm ready to go all the way. I want to know all the answers to the universe, and I'm ready to just go all the way in, right? So no, like doing Iboga is not already going all the way in, but I started charging forward in a deeper way. I felt like I was seeking something, and I came to learn a different lesson after all this. But for this particular last one, me and Bryce were doing some Bufo training, and we had a whole group of other people, and I was down in Mexico for a while, and we went to his friend's little healing land. It was huge. It was like 30 acres, down in another area of Mexico. And so we were doing Bufo training. So I did Bufo during that training on day one. Let's say day one. This was a 7-day experience. Okay. Day one, I did Bufo. The night that I did Bufo, there was another group doing an ayahuasca ceremony that night outside. So they asked me if I want to do ayahuasca. I was like, screw it, why not? Let's do ayahuasca. So after doing Bufo that day, I did ayahuasca at night, right? The next morning, I slept in a little bit. I was supposed to do a temazcal, but I just didn't have the energy. I was a little worn out from the ayahuasca and the Bufo. But after they were done with the temazcal, we went back to our other healing center in Rosarito, and we did combo during the day. And we were training others. So I was like, well, I'm going to be a example of what I'm teaching here. So I was showing people little nuances of how I did that. So after combo, we were going to be serving Iboga. We were doing PTA that night, which is partial total alkaloids. So that's a much more concentrated version. You have TA, which is total alkaloids, and then PTA, which is partial total alkaloids. Basically, you have Ibogaine, which is the primary alkaloid, right? But then you have other alkaloids in there that help facilitate more of the physiological and the brain chemical homeostatic, maximizing effects. Whereas Ibogaine in and of itself is great for addiction, but it limits the healing process in the physical body. So you need all the other alkaloids to help to communicate into the body. So I chose to do PTA that night. Now PTA you do much, much, much less. That is I believe it's 14 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, something like that. And somebody didn't show up for the ceremony. So, cause I was supposed to serve it. And when we served it, we would take about 10 to 15 grams of the root bark just to be in the medicine with them. And honestly, to stay up that long because it's a long journey. So with the PTA, I only had to take 4 pills as opposed to 80, which is kind of nice. And I was surprised, man, that hit me harder than the root bark did. But I also had just done combo and ayahuasca and Bufo prior to that, right? So this one in particular went way, way deeper than any of the other experience I did, right? I just blasted myself all the way open, but it was very strange because I just experienced myself dying over and over and over and over again. Must have been it happened so fast. What I remember 6 distinctively still, but there were many, many, many more than that. I saw myself driving on a road that looked like I was in San Francisco, and an earthquake happened and it swallowed my car. And it literally I'm observing it, but I can feel it.
Wow.
So I still to this day don't know exactly what that means. My best guess is that I was revisiting or clearing out past lifetimes of my, and I was reintegrating all these parts of my soul. So I was bringing all my past lifetimes into this lifetime. I could be off. And if anybody else that's actually watching this Webdelics podcast, please let me know what your opinion is on what that might be. Because I really don't know. But I've also got to the point where I'm okay not knowing, right? All right, well, that happened. Cool. There was another one where, first let me back. Before I started seeing all my death, I became an indigo flame, which is kind of where the idea of my book came in. But when I became this flame, I was zipping around the cosmos, and I suddenly saw and understood the process of reincarnation and why our souls come in and how we choose what we need to learn. And, the soul lessons, when we die, we see all the lessons that we were supposed to learn, all the lessons that we didn't learn, the people we hurt, the people we loved, and all the culmination of experiences and what we still had left to learn. And based on what we still had left to learn, when we're ready, we return back to the world and we are born again into a new body, right? And then we choose that place, that life to continue the process of clearing out this karma. I do believe that we're in a different age right now where we're shifting from karma to dharma, but that's a conversation for another time. So I became this indigo flame. I'm zipping around the cosmos and I'm seeing all these other flames out there zipping around. Then suddenly I look down at Earth and I see these guys shooting down into the world. And I know these are souls that are going back in to be born, to reincarnate, right? Also, as I was going through this process, when I was seeing myself dying over and over and over again, another one in particular that was freaky is I was on this ladder that was like all the way up to space, kind of like, you know how like Red Bull, you know, skydivers, the ridiculous. So I was way, way, way like thousands of feet up in the air, and this looked like a rebar rod wrapped around my head and decapitated me. Just took my head right off. Yeah, and I'm looking at it, and it was me. Like my face was inside, like the helmet and the suit and everything. So seeing myself die over and over like this, it freaked me out, but then it didn't freak me out, which was, I was weird about, why am I not freaked out about this? It was very, very strange. It was a very confusing ceremony because I wasn't necessarily scared. It's almost like I accepted death fully. And that's been a big theme of my life, of facing fear and facing death and allowing it to be okay. Because once you face the fear of death, then you're free to live. Right? And there's no more inhibitions and resistance to the flow of where the universe is guiding us. So, but the really thing that twisted me sideways was that when I finally decided to come back into my body, right, I started zipping towards the earth. The moment that I got back into my body, right, I felt a tap on my shoulder in the real world. Now, mind you, like I'm way deep, way deep in the medicine. Okay, like I'm fully, engulfed into this process. And I felt this tap my shoulder, and I lift up my eye mask. Now, my eyes have been closed for 16, 18 hours by now. So it was light out, and I opened my eyes, and the light, it felt like I was on like a hospital bed with the light that's a bed, above like a surgery. And so I couldn't tell what it was. I was still way out of it. And suddenly this head peeks over. And it's this Mexican dude. He's like, "Hey, bro, can you move your car?" I jumped out of my seat. I was like, I felt like I almost had a heart attack. I was like, "Who the hell are you? And where's Grace? What's going on here?" I freaked out. I didn't know if I was alive, if I was dead, if I was what was going on. So come to find out, Bryce had left somewhere. I don't know where he went, but it was the lawn maintenance guy. They had come in the morning to, clean up the lawn care, and they couldn't get their vehicle in. My truck was blocking their entrance. So there was there was a paramedic sitting there, but he was off of La La Land, like doing something. So nobody was there to keep, and it wasn't just me in the ceremony. There was 5 other people, right?
Wow. So
I thought that was pretty messed up. I was really, really pissed at Bryce after that, because my heart jumped out of my chest, and it felt like it traumatized me for a little bit. Once I got over it and I got back to myself, like, all right, like, do not ever let that happen again. But that was when everything in my life changed, and honestly, a lot of bad things happened that really shook my world. But eventually, I believe at this point that I had some really deep karma to pay.
Yeah.
And I paid that karma. But later on, come to find out that during that particular ceremony, Bryce is the most powerful healer that I've ever met. And, God rest his soul. He was my soul brother. But he started to kind of go off the rails, and he's just some weird things started happening with him. And he liked to go deep. I mean, I love to go deep on medicine. He's the only person I ever met that actually pushed me beyond my limits to go even deeper. But there was this thing with ketamine. We both like to work with it every now and then, but we both agreed that we would never bring ketamine, because it's synthetic. We never bring that medicine into working with the natural medicines that come from the earth. Mm-hmm. There's a really specific and important reason for that. But come to find out, this particular ceremony, he was injecting himself with ketamine throughout the whole experience, and that I'm sure that was a part of the reason why. Apparently he met some chick and he decided to go get some food or something with this chick, and completely forgot about us, as we were coming out of the medicine. So soon after that ceremony, 2 weeks later, now I wasn't at this particular ceremony, right? I was in LA, and I had started dating this woman, and we were working on doing our own ceremony stuff and networking and whatnot. So we were busy doing our own thing, but Bryce had facilitated another ceremony with only 3 people there this time. This particular ceremony, he was still doing this, non-integral stuff while he's serving this medicine. Apparently, this time he had 3 people there, and he was drinking alcohol, and also he was doing ketamine, and he had left with this girl during the ceremony, left the playlist on repeat on one song, which that in of itself will make you go mad. Yeah. Right? You like the music is everything. The music is what brings you through the journey. And he left with this girl while he was just doing other stuff and completely just didn't pay any attention and neglected these people. So the next day, when everybody's waking up, it's traditional to do Bufo after you do Iboga, because after Iboga, the Bufo actually grounds you out, as opposed to when you do it on its own, it blasts you out of your body. This actually brings it back in, right? So he went and now, of course, this information is coming from a third party, a friend of mine that was there. So I helped him through some stuff about a year after all this happened. But there was one particular guy there. He was from Africa, and he took his he took his first Bufo hit. And apparently, Bryce felt like this guy didn't go deep enough. So mind you, this healing center, in the back, there was this big patio area, and at the edge of the patio area was a flimsy kind of bar, but it went over a cliff that went about, I'd say, a half mile down into the ocean, right?
My.
So Bryce gave him his first shot, and there's a couple different ways to serve it too. You can do it laying down, standing up. This particular time, he did it standing up with this guy. So he felt like he didn't go deep enough. So he was like, "Wait a minute, I want you to, go in deeper." So he set it up again, gave him another hit. Apparently, as soon as he gave him the hit, a door must have slammed or heard a sound. For a split second, he looked like this, right? In that split second, this guy, in his Bufo, depths of his Bufo journey, he ran over and jumped over the edge and fell to his death at the beach. And of course, after that happened, that was an extreme tragedy. And now you have the federales, you have the Mexican police. So he had to round up, pay off the cops when they came and figure it out. And so now you have a couple other people that had all just come out of this very deep transformative experience, and they didn't know what to do.
Yeah, I'm shocked they all didn't flip out. I would have.
Well, I know my friend that I talked to about this, he relapsed on heroin almost immediately after that.
Before we go any further about this,
yeah,
what would you say then, hearing this? And I'm so glad you were candid about this, because who is facilitating your journey, the healer that you're working with, it goes without saying, but this really underscores it, is of extraordinary importance for anyone who may be hearing this and freaking out just knowing that such a thing happened. What advice would you give to them with regards to making sure, to the greatest extent possible, that isn't the healing experience or that they have, or the healer that they are working with?
So as far as working with Iboga, you definitely need to do some background work. Of course, if it's possible, I recommend knowing somebody that somebody knows.
Right.
Right. But also get to know this person for a little bit. Get to see their habits. I wouldn't, especially when you're dealing with this medicine, I wouldn't jump into it right away. Mm-hmm. Even if you can, work with combo or some other less intense medicine initially, you want to see how they work with you, how they work with others. Ask around with other people and do your due diligence. And even with Bryce, I mean, up until that point, he was the most powerful healer I knew. He did some incredible, powerful, amazing work, but there were signs. And unfortunately, I believed in him so much, and I wanted to believe that he was good, that I think I may have miscalculated or not looked as deeply as I should have, or maybe just I should have been more assertive with helping him out. But also too, I feel like there's an essence of that was his karma. He just had some of the most powerful healers also have some of the darkest shadows, but you have to be able to recognize in a situation if that facilitator is also facing their own shadow, doing their own work, if they're vulnerable and authentic. Like a lot of leaders, particularly in this space, they don't like to look vulnerable, even though this is a very vulnerable type of work, right? Because they don't want to look like they're weak or they're incompetent. But the fact is that everybody's imperfect. So if somebody is trying to look like they know everything and they're perfect, or they're, an authority figure, then I would say that is even a red flag. You need to know that this person is going to openly, discuss their own faults, right? Their own learned lessons, if you will. Right. I think anybody that's done a substantial amount of work in this place, they've had bad experiences, they've had good experiences, right? And a lot of people, one thing that really bothers me in this space is a lot of people that they've done a couple ceremonies and then they think that they're a shaman or a facilitator, right? Like I didn't even start serving ayahuasca until well over 1,000 ceremonies. It takes time, and you have to be able to face your own stuff to a very deep, profound extent, because there are considerations that have to go in to physical health, to emotional health, to spiritual health, and of course, if you can work with someone that has had a mentor or has had the experience of not just them serving, but working with someone else to serve as well. Those are all better signs. But I'm not gonna lie, Iboga, it's probably the there's the highest amount of liability, with this medicine, because it is it's such a commitment, right? So look for the authenticity, look for the vulnerability, ask the hard questions, right? Like questions like, has anything bad ever happened in your ceremony? And if they can't at least give you some examples of things that maybe have gone a little bit sideways, but then how they dealt with it and connected to it, and you can feel if someone's being authentic and clear and straight, or if they're trying to shift. Like one thing I see a lot of this, overly love and light kind of energy, right? Yeah, love and light, of course, right? But this work is about going into the shadow, and you have to be able to navigate your own shadow in its fullest expression if you're going to be really doing this kind of work, right? So that's why, after that, I of course stepped away from serving Iboga. I have worked one-on-one, with people in very specific circumstances, but it's rare. Usually, I can end up getting a massive amount of healing accomplished with less intense medicines. But for those that do feel called to this kind of medicine, honestly, especially veterans, guys in the special ops community, especially, they respond very, very well to this, because it can also actually help to heal TBI and PTSD, which is rare.
How would you say then the long-term impact of Ibogaine has played out in your own life?
Iboga has completely transformed everything in my life. I did go through about a 1.5 to 2 year period where after Bryce died, because about a month after that last flood dose ceremony, he went down, And me and everybody else that, worked with him, we tried getting through to him, but he was just, became lost. And I think that, the karma of him being at fault for, that poor guy, dying, it was too much for him. So he went on a vacation like a month later, right around his birthday, and he injected ketamine into himself to stop his heart and death. And after he died, that hit me so hard, and I started doing a massive amount of ketamine. And it was weird because what it felt like for me was that the spirit of Iboga and the spirit of ketamine came together in my consciousness, and it warped the voice that kind of became my intuitive voice in my own head. And I started to believe that in order to be able to help others, I needed to be on ketamine to do it, because I was doing some powerful work. I was pulling demons out of people and doing some deep, intense healing work with it. But I also felt that I needed to be on it in order to do that. And of course, ketamine, it depletes the body. It can beat up the kidneys, the bladder, right? And I started to get to the point where I couldn't. It was the only time in my life I ever felt that I couldn't stop doing something. It like something took over, and even when I felt like I didn't want to do it, I would just keep going. It was a very strange experience, and I struggled with that for about a year. About 6 months after Bryce died, I went back home to Massachusetts to see my family, and literally the day that I got home, I was trying to connect with people on Facebook to have a little reunion, see people I haven't seen in like 10, 15 years. I found out that my childhood best friend that was there with me through all my foster care stuff and, all my very difficult childhood and teenage years, he was in a coma in the hospital. Apparently he had tried to get off of SSRIs, and when he did, he spent a night binge drinking, and something happened in his brain, and he went into a coma, and then he died the next day.
Oh my God.
Right? And then about 6 months, 9 months later, after that, my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, OD'd on fentanyl. So it was like back to back to back, and it was a lot of death. And at the same time too, I had basically lost my custody battle. So that had drained me of all my money, all my emotional, willpower. So, but I feel like I had to just be sucked dry and lose all these things to fully surrender. And that took a while, for me to be able to move through and accept and even deal with. But I'm grateful, and I'm happy to say now that like everything in my life has turned around, done a complete 180, and I finally feel reborn. But maybe 4 flood doses, especially that last one with the Bufo, Ayahuasca, Iboga, maybe that was a little too much. But it pushed me so deep and so far that it was a complete death and rebirth on many different levels.
Nahum, we've touched on ketamine a little bit. We've talked a little bit about the impact of it on Bryce's life, as well as how it interplayed with Iboga in your own life. But talk to us a little bit more about some of your candid feeling states, right? Like you've mentioned that you felt like you had to be on it all the time in order to heal people, which is to me a dark side, like we talked about at the top of the hour. All of these sorts of things, if they're not managed correctly, or if they are in the wrong hands, or for a whole host of reasons, can lead to trouble. What exactly are you talking about when you are referencing the dark side of ketamine?
So, first of all, ketamine is synthetic, all right, which in and of itself, it's not optimal, right? I'd much prefer, things that come from nature and the earth. There's a sort of ketamine brings you straight to this blissed out state. Almost, more often than not.
Mm-hmm.
So when you can just go, when you take a substance that just brings you straight to a blissed out state, there is no real internal work that is required while you're going in there. And not only that, but you can take it while you're on SSRIs. There's virtually no contraindications, right? which also means that while you're suppressed, you can still go somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're able to do that, that is escapism to me. That's not doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
And we have these medicines, we use these medicines to do the work. Now, I will say that ketamine has its place. It does have its healing components. For example, right? If you have some kind of physiological issue, or I'll give you a perfect example. I was working with a client that 64 years old, he just had a complete and total knee replacement, right? So I was working with him to help him heal from this knee replacement. And we got to week 3 and he was having a lot of issues. He couldn't move his body, right? There was a massive amount of pain and stiff stuckness in the tissue. And we were talking to the doctors and they were like, we're going to have to do an adjustment, which is essentially putting him back under anesthesia and moving it through the full range of motion, re-tearing all this tissue so that they could get healing back. And of course, my client was terrified, right? He had already gone through and all this, right?
Yeah.
So I proposed that we go ahead and we use ketamine with vibroacoustics to numb it out a little bit so that we can get the movement in there and break it up and, a little more gently, but still get to where we needed to go, right? And that ended up working. Wow. So we got to bypass that adjustment. And then I got him better in 6 weeks. 6 weeks at 64 years old from a complete and total knee replacement. Normally something like that would take about 6 to 9 months. All right. So between peptides and ketamine, that particular circumstance is beneficial. If you have something that you would need to go under anesthesia for, like a chiropractic adjustment, sometimes something's too stuck, or a pinched nerve or something like that, then that could be beneficial in a situation like that. But it makes me very, very weary when I see ketamine clinics popping up left and right all over the place, right? Because number one, a clinical setting like that, for me personally, it's not shamanic. It's not like the setting is not exactly optimal for a place to feel safe, right? In my personal opinion. But not only that, there is a high grade possibility for escapism on ketamine. Mm-hmm. It's a dissociative, it's not a psychedelic, right? Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of people, especially addicts, there is already a really strong desire to escape with that. When you're getting ready to do ayahuasca or combo or bufo, there's a general fear that comes up. You have to prepare for it mentally and also physically, right? You have to do a certain diet, or you have to understand what's going on in your body. And then you feel like shit at first, pardon my language. And then after you clean yourself out, you feel better, right? With ketamine, you don't necessarily go into it and feel like shit. You just, you relax, you may surrender, but it's too easy to escape. And when you start to want to feel that feeling, especially if it's not going to have the directive, if you will, to face your stuff. Now you can, if you have the right guidance and the right circumstances, right? But with ayahuasca, with combo, it makes you face yourself whether you like it or not.
Right.
And that's the fundamental and significant difference. But not only that, too, it depletes you. So ayahuasca, Iboga, combo. Now, yes, Iboga does dehydrate you a bit. Okay, so during the process because it's so strong. Besides that, though, it doesn't really deplete anything in your body. Ketamine will deplete micronutrients, right? Like potassium, sodium, different electrolytes. So whenever something depletes you like that, not only that, though, there's a lot of, when it metabolizes in your body, there's a lot of toxic byproducts that get stuck in your bladder. So have you ever heard of ketamine bladder?
I have heard of it. We've not explored it on this show, and I think that there's no reason to assume that our audience members know anything about it. So please discuss.
So ketamine bladder is when you have a chronic, higher level of ketamine metabolizing in your body, and the nerve sensations down into your bladder, your kidneys, even your pelvic floor area, they start to numb out, right? So it'll start where you can't really tell if you got to pee or not, or it can kind of feel like for a man, if you have a large prostate, you got to pee all the time, but then you can't pee, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then in the bladder, the toxic byproduct will start to adhere to the cell walls of the bladder, and they'll start to cause some fibrosis.
Oh my!
Right. So the elasticity of your bladder will get weaker and weaker,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's a general sense of inflammation that ensues until you stop it, and then you heal that. But it is possible. Then that from the bladder will back up into the kidneys, right? And now your kidneys will start to struggle.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've met a few people that they start peeing blood, yet they keep going.
Oh my
Right?
God!
If you're at the point where you're pissing blood, like you got to stop. Like I've seen guys having to wear diapers. Like why?
What?
Yeah. And now I've also discovered devices that can help heal that. All right, but we don't want to go there.
Yeah.
And I don't know any other plant medicine that has that potential. Right. So if you go so far as to, because you can cross a threshold where you inactivate your mind's or your body's ability to sense those nerves that go into the bladder, and then at that point there's so much fibrosis that it'll start to scar. And if your bladder starts to scar, you may have to walk around with a colostomy bag, or you may have to even remove your bladder and get a fake bladder, or even your urethra, all the stuff down there that you do not want to have to go in.
I'm terrified even hearing about it.
Right. So, and now look, like if you're snorting it, right, or doing it recreationally, you're going to have more problems in your nasal cavity, like at first, especially because too much glutamate in the brain will also hyperactivate histamine. So you'll start to have problems there before you get there. If you're injecting it or doing IVs, that's where you're going to have a more pronounced possibility of a problem. However, you can still come to the same, negative space both ways. So I strongly advise, anybody that is diving into that world, look at why you're going into it, number one. And number two, I would highly recommend going to do ayahuasca or combo or bufo before that you even think about doing ketamine. You're going to get so much more healing capacity from that than you are with doing 40 or 50, ketamine treatments. And the interesting thing is, and of course, big pharma has a part to play in this, right? But even the VA now is like, the insurance is paying to go do, like I work with this one client. He said the VA signed him up for, I think, 40 ketamine sessions in the span of 4 months. I mean, why? That's way too much. And like, to what end? What's the point? So there has to be integration. There has to be someone that understands and knows, specifically what and why. Like if you're struggling with depression, okay, then have a plan. Like maybe go do one, but also have a plan to get off of those SSRIs. Have a plan to detox your body, right? Make the shift, the transition, start eating better, create a nutrition plan, an exercise plan. You need all these different things to really have the healing benefits. So ketamine is like, a lot of people are touting it like, it by itself is going to fix everything. And it's simply not true. And I've seen it cause a lot more problems than create solutions in comparison to working with things like ayahuasca, Bufo combo, and even Iboga.
And that goes as to perhaps the one big takeaway that I will remember this extraordinarily vivid and honest conversation about, which is the whole idea of making sure that you're thinking about why you're doing what you're doing, that you are assessing the risks, and that you are not just taking stuff because it feels better or because it's exciting or because the person that you're talking to seems like they're cool when you meet them at first, but to really dig deep, to be aware of of the red flags, to know when to stop, and to not just dive in head first into that swimming pool without knowing whether you're in the shallow end, the deep end, or whether there's even water. And that's really powerful. That's a dose of reality. I like hearing it from you in particular, because clearly you're very invested in the plant medicine area. So it's not like you're coming at this from this sort of war on drugs, puritanical hysteria. You're being honest. You're being honest. And the other thing too that I want to say probably will stay with me is understanding, particularly when it comes to ketamine, and I'd never really thought about it this way, but if there is something that may be right for some people in some circumstances, it may or may not be right for you, depending on really what your fundamental need is. For me, in order to really tap into my purpose in life, for me to be able to feel like I am extracting the full power of plant medicines into who and what I become and my journey on this planet, I needed to be able to, and will continue, I believe, for the rest of my life, to be able to acknowledge, confront my shadow, and work with, be honest about this. Bliss is nice. I ain't gonna lie. But you know what? So is a chocolate cream pie. And you eat too much of that stuff, and you're gonna end up with a leg amputation from diabetes. So so being mindful of this, being real about it, as opposed to viewing them as ketamine, Ibogaine, anything for that matter, as just some magic pill, or the people that work in them as automatically these, as you said earlier, light and love people that have this sort of magical power. That dose of sanity is very much appreciated. If there is one thing that you would like us to take away from, again, what has been a very dramatic as well as candid conversation, or something that you didn't get to say but you want to, what might that be, Nahum?
Well, there's a major awakening going on here in the human consciousness. And when you're going into doing this kind of work, the number one thing that we have to focus on is being willing to face our fear. A lot of people, I'd say 50% of the people that I talk to, they say they want to heal, they say they want to figure it out. But then when the opportunity arises and you have to commit yourself to these diets or these processes or facing these uncomfortable feelings, a lot of times, as soon as that fear comes up, oh, I got something else I got to do, and I got to do this and that. And they actually don't want to face their fear. So very, very important. Okay, these medicines are powerful. They are incredibly beneficial. But if you don't want to go down this road, you can try peptides. You can try acoustics. You can try scalar and 0-point frequency. There are many, many different avenues to get to this healing place. But the one major thing that is inevitable that will come up when you're doing this kind of work, no matter what tool you're using, is you have to look at your patterns of behavior that are creating the problems in your life. And if you're not willing to go all the way into yourself and face those fears and trust the process and do your due diligence, then you're going to do all this stuff you want, and you're just going to loop, and it's just going to keep, you're going to inevitably have a bad experience. Face your fear. That's what these medicines are here to help with, but it's not a magic pill. You got to exercise. You got to change your mindset. You have to ask questions. You have to look at your beliefs and see where your beliefs are bringing you into parts of your life that are not to your liking, right? They're not a magic pill, but they can create magic in your life. Not to mention that bliss feeling. You can definitely have that on ayahuasca. You can have it after combo. You can have it during all these other medicines. It just comes after doing the work. And that is where you know that you really made the vibrational shift. When the bliss comes first and or only bliss, it's maybe giving you a way to observe that other side, but it doesn't give you the experiential contrast, the polarity to know what the difference is between when you're in alignment and when you're not in alignment. And it's that polarity of that frequency that teaches us how to get to that new place.
Sustainability is the word that comes to mind when you are saying all of that. Do you want your bliss to be momentary? Okay, that's cool. Or do you want it to be something that you to use a word you just shared, experientially manifest as your life goes forward. Powerful, powerful stuff. This has been an interview unlike any we've had so far. I'm glad we had it, Nahum. People are inevitably, it's just a matter of divine fate, going to be interested in finding out more about you. You referenced that you have a book. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about that, as well as anything else that you have going on?
So this is my book, The Indigo Flame. This is actually, I describe all this and more in this book. And I share all my experiences and my learned lessons and how you can go about discovering that in your own life. So you can go to spiritualbodybuilder.com. That's where this is available, also on Amazon too. But IG is spiritual_bodybuilder. Basically, look up spiritual bodybuilder and you'll find me. But I love doing a lot of customized work with people, and this is a real, I'm sure you can tell, it's a very big passion of mine. And I also combine in like bodybuilding and or like peptides, nutrition, fitness, all that stuff. It's all important.
We could probably have another 4 or 5 hours worth of conversations about all that, and who knows, maybe someday it'll happen. In the meantime, if you didn't happen to have a pen or your phone out to type in all that information, don't fear. Everything that Nahum just shared is in the show notes and or the caption if you're watching on YouTube. Nahum, it has been a true pleasure. Thank you so much for truly keeping it real here on the Webdelics podcast.
Scott, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I hope we can do this again, because I think that we got a really good flow down, and I think that we can dive into some other cool topics.
Oh, I have no doubt about that. If you enjoyed this episode, found it interesting, and if you did not find it interesting, what is your problem? Something's wrong with you. If you found it interesting, please don't hesitate to follow us on all of our other social media platforms as well as YouTube. Also, press the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or if you are listening on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or some other audio platform, subscribe there. Leave us a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify, please, and a comment below the caption here on YouTube if that's where you're watching it. And then go to our website at webdelics.com. That's WEBDELICS.com. Sign up to our newsletter. You're going to get all sorts of additional information that is curated, credible, and will help you understand really what these substances are about, what their potentials are, but also, as Nahum just did, keep some honesty and integrity in the process as we share accurate information about them. Finally, make sure that above all else, you come back again next time for another episode of the Webdelics podcast.